Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And what's up there, Daddy? I'm Wolfman Jack.
And yes, Patrick, if you didn't get the preamble, you noticed if you listened to the actual podcast version, not the YouTube version, that was a shortened intro to what we normally do, just kind of testing something a little different out. Sometimes I feel like my intros get a little wordy, so I thought,
I like your wordy intros.
Why don't we just give a little synopsis of the movie, give a trailer, and if you have feedback, if you like the bigger, longer intros, please let me know. I will continue to write them, but sometimes I feel like maybe I get a little too wordy, so I did a shortened version this time. So if you do listen to the whole podcast, better, worse, like it, whatever, please let me know, and that'll kind of give me some feedback to what we have going forward. But tonight, Patrick, we are reviewing a new movie, and if you notice, we are releasing the podcast a day later than normal, and there's a reason for that. It's because we actually got pre-screeners for this particular movie. So again, just so everyone's aware, we got the screeners, but we are going to be brutally honest about this movie. We never pull punches on this podcast. We promised you all years ago we would never be the podcast that would start getting nice things and we would lie to you just because we're getting the nice things. So we will be 100% brutally honest about everything we review, and that includes tonight's film, which we did get a pre-screener for, Werewolves.
That's right, Damon. Werewolves released December 6th, 2024, if you're listening live, starring Camden Gary as Emma, Lou Diamond Phillips as Dr. Aranda, James Michael Cummings as Cody, Ilfenish Hedera as Lucy, Katrina Law as Amy, and the star of the movie, everyone's favorite tough guy, Frank Grillo, as Wesley, written by Matthew Kennedy and directed by Stephen C. Miller. Damon, I love a good werewolf movie. I'm kind of a sucker for werewolf movies. Like, I show up for them. Werewolves, we very generously we were given pre-screeners. I felt like a real big shot. I invited my wife into my little screening area in my office because I had to play it from my computer. And like on my screener, like my email would pop up every like 10 minutes. And I'm like, hey, aren't you impressed? Like, there's my email. And she's like, I'll be impressed if the movie's good. You know what I mean? Like, and we sat down for a night of a movie that is just hot off the presses. So just so you know, obviously we're going to keep it the same as we always do. We will have our non-spoiler section that we're going to go over the basic idea of the movie, and then we will get into our spoiler section. And because we are releasing this on the same exact week, be sure to pause at the spoiler section and then go see for yourself, and then come back and tell us if we're full of shit or if we're totally right. Believe me, I get notes on both almost every single week here because our fans are so damn dedicated, so we appreciate that. But yes, Damon, I am a sucker for werewolf movies, and I've known about this movie for quite some time, and I have been anticipating it because, first of all, Frank Grillo is like, you know, I think we did the smart thing last week by doing Predator and priming everybody for like a masculine, testosterone-filled, muscular movie. That's a guarantee. Whenever Frank Grillo top lines your movie, it's going to be manly. There's going to be a lot of 5 o'clock shadow. There's going to be a lot of grumbly voices. There's going to be a lot of striated muscles and you know, some big hulking testosterone-y type shit. Werewolves, Damon, I believe, is no different than that.
It really is. And also, just I want to give one little quick disclosure about this particular podcast. Frank Grillo, I am a fan of Frank Grillo. I've been a fan of Frank Grillo for a lot of years. But I also know Frank Grillo a little bit. I think I've mentioned on this podcast before, and I know I disclosed it. I can't remember what we were talking about at one point. But I'm friends with Jonathan Tucker, who is an actor working very, incredible actor work in Hollywood. And he did a show at Frank Grillo for several years called Kingdom. It was a mixed martial arts show. And as I mentioned on the show before, I am by trade, by my day job, a mixed martial arts journalist. And so through that show, I met Jonathan Tucker and we became friends. And through Jonathan Tucker, I had met and kind of became, I won't say friends, but friendly with Frank Grillo. And I've interviewed Frank a couple of times. So I just want to get that out there because when I say I'm a Frank Grillo fan, I legitimately mean that. I think he is a great action actor, but I actually think he's a pretty underrated actor in general. I had mentioned while we were off air getting ready for the show, he did a one-season arc on one of my favorite shows, Billions, which just recently ended. He played an artist on the show. Didn't, no action, nothing like that. He just played like a painter. and he was
Yeah.
great. So like when he gets stuff to work with, like he's actually a really good actor. Now, yes, you're right. Like he's so well known for the big muscly, grumbly, action parts. We all, of course, know him very well from Captain America: Winter Soldier and other appearances in the Marvel universe as Crossbones. But he is actually like a really solid actor. But Werewolves dips right into the wheelhouse of Frank Grillo, the wheelhouse of being the action star. And I'll be honest, like I was not as familiar with this film until I went to see. I can't remember what movie I saw, but this is the first time I'd heard of it was a trailer. I was in the theater watching some other horror movie, and this popped up, and I was like, "What is this? How have I not heard of this movie before?" And it popped up, and as you mentioned, I know I said this to you off air. I am a massive werewolf fan. Like if you were trying to nail down like all the different like monster genres of horror films, zombies, vampires, that kind of thing, everyone's got a bit of a generalization of what they enjoy. I'd probably rank Werewolves number one if I'm being honest. Like I do like vampire films, I do like a lot of zombie films, but I think werewolves are my favorite. We did a full month of werewolf films a couple of years ago. So I am a sucker for werewolf films just like you. So when I saw this, it kind of dipped its toe in a lot of different waters because it's a horror movie, but it's also a straight up action movie. And coming off reviewing Predator last week, it almost felt like kismet that we were reviewing Werewolves this week.
Yeah, it felt right to roll right into Werewolves, and luckily we had that pre-screener, and we're able to talk about it tonight. And Damon, there's only so much I think we can talk about before we get into the spoiler section, but I want to be able to tell people like the basic premise of this. And like I'm always, because I'm with you, I love werewolf movies. It's just a matter of like, can you keep me on the hook on a werewolf movie? Because I will be brutally honest. There's less good werewolf movies than there are. I mean, yeah, there's less good werewolf movies than there are bad ones. There's actually plenty of bad werewolf movies, and it's kind of like a small batch of good werewolf movies out there. But the good ones I love, the good ones I truly, truly love and hold sacred, and I could watch over and over and over again. There's just a lot of bad ones out there. So it's a matter of like, can your premise hook me? Are the werewolves cool looking? That's a big one for me. I don't know. Call me a furry, Damon. I don't know. I don't know if I have that kink necessarily, but like you need to give me a good werewolf. It's got to be a good looking werewolf. And, ultimately, like, are we going to get a lot of kills? Are we going to get a lot of werewolf like mauling? It is this like supernatural creature that eats human flesh and has super strength and changes by the moonlight. Like, what can you show me new about it? What I liked about Werewolves right off the top was the explanation, because they really, in the spirit of Stephen C. Miller films, because he's kind of known for these high octane films, he goes straight to the action. He really just wants to get us prepped. So he gives you a quick little card at the beginning that explains what happened 1 year ago. 1 year ago, a supermoon triggered something in everyone's DNA, some latent lupine, mixture in everyone's DNA. And if your skin was touched by the supermoon, you turned into a werewolf, and it led to the death of 1 billion people. I'm getting that right? That's
Correct.
the premise.
Yep. That's the premise.
And we are opening this movie 1 year to the day of the supermoon coming back. Now, my wife, who is a moon expert, and I think there's a lot of women out there who know a lot about the moon. She's one of them. And she goes, supermoons don't happen just once a year. They happen multiple times a year. And I was like, you're using logic. We're not there. We're not doing that. And indeed, Damon, for as interesting of a lock-in as that is, where it's like, here we go, a year later, it's going to happen. Werewolves is indeed one of those movies that sort of shucks logic for just delivering on the goods. Do you rock with the idea that like sometimes a movie doesn't have to be good, it just has to be entertaining?
100%. And listen, here's my biggest compliment about Werewolves is that it doesn't try to be more than it is. It's an action horror film. And there, as I've said before, I'm very about all inclusion. I'm all about inclusivity when it comes to horror films. You could be a horror comedy, you could be a horror drama, you could be a lot of different versions of horror films. Psychological thriller that's also a horror film. This is a horror action film, and again, this was totally by accident. We're doing this right after we did Predator. Had no intention of doing that. We just did it, but Predator was a great example of a film that crosses a lot of genres. We said it's almost like the perfect action horror sci-fi film. This is an action horror film that doesn't try to be more than it is. And the way I say that is, and this will probably resonate with a lot of our audience outside of horror, if you've watched the Fast and the Furious movies, the original Fast and the Furious, the very first Fast and Furious movie, I loved that film. I enjoyed that movie all to hell. I am a big Paul Walker fan. Sadly, he's no longer with us. That movie is a blast. It's perfect. It's like the perfect amalgamation of like that late 90s, early 2000s. Everyone's wearing Von Dutch. I mean, we all remember those days. Like, everyone's wearing Affliction t-shirts, Ed Hardy t-shirts. I love the original Fast and Furious. Now, that is like, now they're like 10 films deep or 11 films deep, and I think they got one more coming. There are a lot of enjoyable Fast and Furious films, to be honest. There's several of them that I have enjoyed and really did like. But where Fast and Furious lost me was when they turned them into like super spies, and now they're working for like some secret shadowy government agency. And I think at one point they go to space or something, and I'm just like, you've gone way, way, way farther than street racers hijacking trailers full of DVD players. Like, that's where we began at. Now they're in space and they're working for a shadowy government agency. Like, you've gone off the rails. Like, just end it. Stop, because this is too much. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, when you go beyond yourself, like Fast and Furious was a movie about these, not quite teens, early 20s kids who are hijacking trailers full of, basically doing like what the mob used to do. They're hijacking trailers full of goods and selling them off and making money off it, and also doing street racing. It was cool. Everyone was wearing a lot of bronzer, Carpenter jeans and Von Dutch shirts and hats, and, everyone had a little bit too much testosterone, and, the women were all wearing cropped shirts. Like, we all understood what that movie was. And again, I understood, like, every movie beyond that got a little bit further, a little bit deeper, but it was always kind of like this criminal element, like, teeming at the surface. Then it just started going off the rails with all the other stuff I already mentioned. Where Werewolves succeed is it doesn't try to be more than it is. And the reason I say that is because the premise, as you mentioned, the supermoon created everyone turned into werewolves and 1 billion people died, and now it's 1 year later and they're trying to find a cure, and they're trying to deal with this because the supermoon is coming again, and they know everyone's going to transform again. So everyone's preparing. That's it. That's 2 minutes into the movie. And by the way, that's not a spoiler. If you watch the trailer, I think it actually says that in the trailer. The original trailer, the little 3-minute trailer you watch at the theater, I think it actually says that in the trailer. Or if you go read it on YouTube, it says it on YouTube. The intro, if you're not watching this on YouTube, the intro that I read at the beginning is literally the synopsis from the YouTube page. So I'm not spoiling anything by saying the premise of the movie. The reason I say that is they just set it up. We don't need to see flashbacks. They're not trying to tell, they're not trying to tell the whole story. Maybe if they do a sequel, maybe we'll talk about that later. Like, maybe they want to do a prequel where it actually happened for the first time, but they're just setting it up. And then once you get in the movie, about 15 minutes in, it's wolf on human, and it's just mayhem. And that's what they're going for in this movie. And I appreciate the simplicity of that.
You can't argue with getting right to the point. Like, I mean, literally, it's on the title card, and once they start cutting to the visuals of the movie, you're just setting up for werewolf action. You're just gearing up for it. All you need to know is who, what, where, and when. And they give it to you within the first 5 to 10 minutes, and you are getting right into it. There's nothing wrong with that. Some movies are going to do that. In fact, a lot of movies kind of screw themselves by trying to over-explain shit. I might argue Werewolves under-explains. Maybe slightly, or they're just they're a little like they're a little lopsided. They kind of choose some things and choose not to do other things. We'll get into that in spoilers. But it really hit me about 30 to 40 minutes into this movie what kind of movie we were dealing with, Damon. Now, we're getting near the end of the year. We're in the final month of the year, and pretty soon we're going to have our year in review and all that good stuff. And I'm realizing Werewolves won't be on that list. That's okay. It's not a problem. A lot of movies I like this year did not end up on this list. There are movies like Quiet Place Day One. There's movies like Longlegs. There's movies like Heretic that are really. There's movies like The Substance. Holy shit. That are just like the whole town's talking about them. Everybody has something to say about those movies. They're very big. They're huge, big movies that are making a lot of money. Smile 2 made another $100 million. You know what I mean? Like, these are the big ones. Then there's something that kind of brought me back to my youth for a second. Now, you and I grew up on cable, and we watched a lot of cable. And there was a little show I used to love watching called USA Up All Night. And I believe they're still around, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if they are or not. But when I was a kid, USA Up All Night.
Rhonda Shear. It's the USA Up All Night. That was her name. I just remember Rhonda Shear, right?
There you go, Rhonda Shear, yeah. And it was just this show that, like, on, I believe, Saturday nights or something, just played kind of B movies. You know, a lot of them were like TNA and, blood and guts and ass is basically the basic formula of USA Up All Night. These were not those movies, the Quiet Place Day ones and the Heretics. It was not those kind of movies. It was lesser known movies. It was smaller movies from place like Canon Pictures and, Asylum and stuff like that. Like, it was just like, hey, this is a kind of a fun side movie. If you want to get drunk and have fun with your friends and watch USA Up All Night, you might see a movie like Werewolves on there. Some would take offense to that. I don't think Stephen Miller and company would take offense to me saying it's that kind of movie. It's the kind of movie where you just turn your brain off and you go for the ride. If you keep your brain on, you're going to have problems with this movie. But I want to kind of like set the expectation for people as they go into the theater. It's like, yeah, it's not going to be on my top 10 list. It's not. I'm telling you right now, it won't be on my top 10 list. But if I maybe ate an edible and me and Damon Martin had just gotten back from a Chili's to go and we decided to sit down at Werewolves like at the theater and have a good time and just fucking laugh, it'll do that for you. I'm not saying it's so bad it's good, and I know you don't even like that formula, the so bad it's good formula. It's not that. It's not that. It's just like, you know what? Maybe I wanted to see guns blazing, tough talking, lots of werewolves, big teeth, blood, guts, and gore, and maybe some shit I hadn't really seen before because other movies that are taking themselves seriously wouldn't use logic like this, or should I say the lack of logic that this movie uses. Those movies wouldn't do that. This movie goes, if you want to see something you've never seen with a werewolf before, because it makes no goddamn sense, we will give it to you in this movie. If you just agree, if you come in and you sign the agreement and realize Werewolves is not that kind of movie. It doesn't take itself seriously in that respect. Everyone in the world of werewolves takes themselves seriously, but if you don't take the movie seriously, you might actually have a good time at the movies.
The best core, like I mentioned Fast and the Furious, and earlier,
it's a good example.
Earlier this year at work, we get into we have a weekly meeting, editorial meeting, and then at the end it always ends up devolving into like conversations about films and TV, like what we've seen recently.
As it should.
And we have a group of people who absolutely love like the Fast and Furious series, but they were also talking about the Jason Statham movie that came out recently, Zookeeper. And they were just Beekeeper. And they were
Zookeeper's his next year's movie.
They were raving about it, and and I saw the trailer and I was like, this looks like the dumbest premise of a movie, but when I say dumb, I almost mean that as a compliment. Like, I don't need it to be more than what it is. Yes, you can have the kind of the higher brow action films. I would consider the first John Wick to be like a higher slightly
Yeah.
higher brow action film. By the way, I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I'm just saying like slightly like next level.
Yeah, Mission Impossible, James
Yeah.
Bond. These are the
But
kind of highbrow. Yeah.
But I mentioned, and they were talking for like 10 minutes how like this movie made no logical sense, but it was so much fun. Now I've not seen it yet, but they were loving it, and I was like, I kind of want to see. I still haven't seen it, but I was like, I kind of want to see this now because sometimes I just want to sit down in front of a TV, grab a drink, as you said, pop an edible, and just relax because you know me. I love a good thinking man's movie. I love to be mentally stimulated by a film. But sometimes I just want to watch something dumb and fun. And I keep saying Zookeeper. Beekeeper was a good example of that. We grew up in an era of action films led by martial arts stars, guys like Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme. One of my all-time favorite movies is Bloodsport. That is not a particularly well-acted film. It is not a particularly well-written film, but it is awesome. I love it. And as a martial arts kid, I had like that and Karate Kid were my two, like that was like the Bible to me. It was Bloodsport and Karate Kid. Now, if you go back and watch Bloodsport now, it's pretty cheesy. It's not particularly well acted. There's some really bad lines in there, like dialogue-wise. And some really bad dubbing on top of that, just to throw that out there. But I love it. It's just that quintessential late 80s action martial arts movie. You remember American Ninja? Remember Michael Dudikoff? Remember that name? Like,
yes.
They didn't need to be more than what they were. Like, I remember renting American Ninja and Chuck Norris movies, and I just wanted to see some cool kicks and some cool fight scenes. And did I need this to be the most logically brilliant movie of all time? No, I needed it to be fun, dumb, and action-filled or martial arts-filled or whatever I was going for. Werewolves doesn't try to be more than what it is. It is and again, I mean this is a compliment, it is a dumb action horror film. It is a film that you could just sit down, veg out. Like imagine this, you said you and me going to the movies and like just kind of like enjoying. This is the kind of movie you go to the movies with your buddy and you guys are high-fiving during the movie. Not
yes.
because like you don't need to, this is not the kind of movie where, hold on now, I missed the line. What did I miss? You're fine. Okay, you're fine. You're fine. I promise
you didn't miss anything.
I promise you're fine. But there are going to be moments where you're going to be fist bumping, you're going to be high fiving, and listen, if you need to get up and get another beer, I think you'll be okay. But it's just a dumb, fun movie. And I listen. Maybe Stephen Miller will listen to this. Maybe Frank Grillo. Maybe some other people will be like, I don't want you to describe our movie as dumb. I mean it as a compliment. I'm saying I'm
saying it's dumb in a good way.
I'm saying it's like when I go to see a Jason Statham movie, when I go to see a new Liam Neeson movie that's not Taken, because Taken just totally changed his career. A new Liam Neeson movie, or of that's what I'm getting. Like if that ilk of movies, or I know what I'm getting into. I know when I go see The Beekeeper, I am not watching an Oscar-worthy film. I'm not going there to watch an Oscar-worthy film. I'm going to watch something that I can just enjoy, eat some popcorn, enjoy just a fun action movie at a theater. And when I go to see that, I am going for a totally different experience than when I went a couple weeks ago and saw Nora, which was brilliant. I adored it. What an incredible movie that was. Two different film-going experiences, and I want two different film-going experiences. Werewolves is that. It is an action horror film that's going to give you some muscles. It's going to give you some really cheesy dialogue at times. It's going to give you a lot of action. It's going to give you some werewolves, some blood, some guts, some crazy fight scenes, lots of guns, and a very simple premise that we already explained. A supermoon turns people into werewolves, and they're trying to stop it. That's all you need to know. You don't need to know anything else, and that's it. And like I said, it doesn't try to be more than what it is, and I appreciate that because you and I both know, Patrick, you go back and listen to our archives of movies that try to be more than what they are. We've reviewed a ton of those movies.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that we end up giving mostly negative reviews to. Now, again, I'm not telling you that you're going to sit down and say, this is one of my top 10 films of the year. Maybe you are a huge Jason Statham fan, and Zookeeper, Beekeeper, whatever the fuck it's called, is your number one movie of the year. That's fine. I'm cool. Whatever floats your boat, whatever you love. For me personally, I can say I enjoy those kind of films, but it's not at the end of the year one of the ones I'm like, man, what a cinematic achievement.
Right.
That's where Werewolves fits in. It fits nicely into that genre, except it's also got horror, which is my thing.
Yeah, it's got werewolves, which is definitely my thing. Like, I definitely want to see that. So, you know, if you like Double Impact or No Holds Barred or Missing in Action, if you just come from the era where you miss, you know, what we might call straight to Blu-ray, straight to video, TV, even TV movie. If you're into that kind of stuff, Werewolves has got you. They got you, bro. Like, don't even worry about it. I'm saying, you know, take a ride share to the theater, pregame a little bit, however you like to pregame. Go in there and just have a good time with a couple of people too, by the way. I actually had fun sitting there watching it with my wife, watching it, laughing at stuff with my wife. Like it was actually kind of a good time when you think about it that way. Okay? When you think about that, if you sat down getting ready to see if it's going to be on the top of your list at the end of the year, you're going to be disappointed. It's not that kind of movie. Don't and we're going to get into the pros and cons in just a minute here, but I'm just letting you know right now that if you're in the mood this weekend to just kind of fucking let loose, tip a few back, pop a few, whatever you pop, responsibly, please. Get a good ride home and just enjoy yourself with a couple of buddies to go at Werewolves. That's all you need to do. That's truly all you need to do.
Like, the best comparison I can make for this movie is like a movie we reviewed during our werewolf month, which ended up being, you know, what is now, I think, my favorite werewolf movie of all time is Dog Soldiers. Dog Soldiers is action, it's harrowing, it's intelligent storytelling, it's great acting. It is a brilliant film, a brilliant werewolf movie. I love Dog Soldiers. Incredible, incredible film. The great Neil Marshall, who you and I have praised left, right, and center on this podcast. We love Dog Soldiers. Now, does it have a similar-ish tone in terms of like military, guns, and werewolves? Sure, but think of it this way. This is going to be a funny one. Imagine Under Siege. You know Under Siege was Steven Seagal.
Under Siege is perfect to talk about.
And then Hunt for Red October. They both take place on Navy ships. But I don't think you're going to compare Hunt for Red October to Under Siege, right? Like, they both have a similar-ish setting. One's on a submarine, one's on a Navy ship. But you would never say Under Siege and the Hunt for Red October in the same category. That's kind of what I'm saying here. Like, Werewolves is Under Siege, Dog Soldiers is the Hunt for Red October.
There's Night of the Living Dead. There's Return of the Living Dead. They are different things. Don't confuse the two. You know what I mean? That's all we're saying, okay?
Yeah. Just like I said, if you can, and by the way, I like Under Siege. I enjoy Under Siege.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, Return of the Living Dead is one of yours and mine favorite films. Am I going to say this is a masterpiece of cinema? No, it's not a masterpiece of cinema. It's fucking awesome, though, right? And I'm not calling Werewolves awesome, by the way. I'm just saying, like, there is a difference. There is a mood. And this is the mood we're in tonight, Damon. I wish we had popped edibles and done this podcast in particular. I come in bone sober because I want to give you the best possible podcast I can. But this is one of those nights where if we were in person to talk about this, there would be brews cracked and edibles popped. That's how this night would have gone if we were in person. And sometimes you just need those nights, you know what I mean? Especially at the end of the year when you're kind of winding down. It's been a year, brother. Like, just like you kind of want to wind down, turn your brain off. Yeah, check out Werewolves. Like, you know, I will endorse it in that respect.
Yeah, and also just so you know, like, Return of the Living Dead, obviously a bit of an inspiration for our title, and we reviewed that movie. What was that, like our 5th episode or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
To this day, I still have this clip saved for just moments such as this.
What the hell's going on, Bert? The brain! The brain! I hit the fucking brain! Then do something else, for goddammit, the hell's sake!
Now, I love that movie, but is anyone going to listen to that clip and think, man, what an Oscar-worthy performance? You and I laugh all the time going, do something else, for goddammit, the hell's sake! Just take it at face value for what it is. If you can go watch, you know, as I said, Under Siege, whatever Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, Marked for Death, that's Steven Seagal also, Double Impact.
Pretty much any Steven Seagal movie. Yeah, it's we're kind of in that. We're in the Steven Seagal range tonight.
Yeah, like again, but also, and this is where we teeter into the horror side. If you're like us, and I love a good werewolf movie, this is just that. It's that kind of movie tossed in with some werewolves. And again, it's not trying to be more than it is. And I promise you, I'm not trying to sell you that this is some cinematic masterpiece. This is a fun, dumb action movie with werewolves, some cool effects to a point, and just enjoy a night where you could just veg out in front of a movie screen and enjoy it for what it is, and don't go in thinking it's more than what it. Don't go in expecting dog soldiers. Don't go in expecting The Hunt for Red October. Go in expecting Under Siege. Go in expecting Marked for Death. Go in expecting Double Impact, American Ninja. Let me name every other movie I already talked about tonight. Go in expecting that, and that's what you're going to get.
Damn straight.
All right, let's get into spoilers now. As we've already said, this is coming out the day before the movie comes out. So, obviously,
coming out the day of.
Yeah, if you're listening to this immediately, and we always appreciate the folks who do listen to our episodes right away, and you haven't seen Werewolves, come back. Or, if you've seen it, here we go, or you just don't care. We're going to get into spoilers now. So just to be totally clear, full-on spoilers from here on out. So, Patrick, before we get to categories, can we talk about, some of the good and the bad about this movie? Because there's a mix, let's be honest.
There's a mix. There's a mix of things. First of all, like right off the top, so, Frank Grillo, is prepping his niece and his dead brother's wife for the oncoming onslaught of werewolves that night. It's basically purge night, but it's werewolves. And so he's fortified the house. Everything's ready to go. I mean, literally ready to go. They don't waste any time. And he's just going to go. He's got to go off and do some shit. But he's just kind of talking with them. He's all ripped up and stuff. And then he talks to the neighbor who's firing off like an AK or a fucking AR, right next door. And he's like, hey, we calm fucking down. That dude's all ooh rah, fucking, everybody's all amped and ready to go. And
by the way, let me just throw this out there. Mythbusters, did you ever watch Mythbusters? Mythbusters has ruined me for action movies, because I remember they did an episode one time where they were talking about would a car stop gunfire? Because you watch any great action movie, they always sit behind a car.
That's right.
To block the bullets. And there's an episode where they're just shooting regular rounds, and the rounds just rip right through the car. A car would not stop. You would be dead. If you hid behind a car, you're getting killed by bullets. So now anytime I watch a great action movie and they're hiding behind a little piece of sheet metal, and I'm like, you'd be dead. So when that guy's firing that AK and whatever else, and he's like, hey, my niece and sister-in-law next door, they'd be dead already, by the way. That's just that show.
It would have blown right through their
sorry,
their wall.
He's just he's firing full-on machine gun rounds next door, and I'm like, everyone next door is dead right now, by the way.
Yeah, that's why we start this movie by not applying logic to it, right? Not at all. Yeah, you start right away by going, okay, that's what it is. But dude's all ooh-rah. He's ready to go. He wants to kill some werewolves that night. He literally puts on a flak jacket that says wolf killer. He's putting on war paint. I mean, they are amping up the testosterone. And then you got Frank Grillo, who is literally the manliest man alive. He is just he makes any other man like Hugh Jackman would look like a sissy next to him. You know what I mean? It's just he's a man's man, and he gets his niece and his sister-in-law ready, and he's like, cool, I'm off to go be a microbiologist. I'll see you later. And you're like, what? Damon, I'm going to say it again. Frank Grillo is not a mercenary. He's not a soldier of fortune. He's not a special ops guy. He's a microbiologist, and he's off on werewolf night to go do microbiology shit. Now, there have been some stretches in my day, but Frank Grillo as a microbiologist, now I'm not saying that the man himself isn't intelligent, I'm just saying the character actor that I have known for a decade or so is Action Jackson. That's the kind of guy I see Frank Grillo as. So I was like, oh, they're going to make him a scientist, because he starts suiting up in a hazmat suit. I'm like, why is he in a hazmat suit and not tactical gear? Because him and Lou Diamond Phillips, by the way, have they believe they have devised this like this sort of like I don't know what you call it, like a serum or something that might keep people from turning during the supermoon. They don't get into why, they don't get into how, they don't get into how long they've been working. They just like literally like, we got the serum, we're going to test it tonight on a couple of willing and some unwilling subjects. And if you think it goes farther than that, it really doesn't. like they test these people. They open up the bay doors to their hangar or whatever. The moonlight comes in, they start to turn, but they don't. Like the stuff works. And they're like, oh shit, okay, cool, they're not turning. Well, about an hour into that process, and they don't bother explaining time jumps or anything. You just have to accept that an hour has gone by. And after an hour has gone by, the serum wears off, and all these people in these cages turn into werewolves. All hell breaks loose in the most ridiculous ways possible. And the whole lab comes crashing down. Now Frank Grillo has no choice but for him and another scientist to run like hell and fight like hell to get back to his niece and his sister-in-law. Not that he's telling anyone that he's doing that. Like, you just have to understand that that's what's happening now. They keep it simple. They keep it surface level, and they just say, shit went wrong, now I run.
And also to the listen, you mentioned the microbiology thing. Now, I did not have the benefit of watching this with anyone, so I was literally texting you during the entire movie. So we were having like a theater experience, except not actually watching the movie together. And that was one of my comments. I was like, Frank Grillo is a microbiologist. That's a choice. And by the way, it's not because Frank Grillo doesn't have the range to play a microbiologist. I said earlier, he played an artist in Billions, and I thought he did great. He's a good actor. The reason I say that is when you meet him, the premise that you're meeting him under is it's almost like he's a survivalist. Like he's building this elaborate, like almost like this like survivalist compound for his sister-in-law and his niece, with like barbed wire fences and electrified fences and cameras and guns and nails on the roof, and like it's like full. He's got bear traps set up all over the place. Like you would think he's a hunter or a soldier. Like there's no world where this doesn't give you the idea that he is just a full-on military badass. And then when he's like, I have to leave, they need me tonight, so he goes to the compound where they're doing this experiment. I'm like, oh, he's the leader of the security force, making sure that these werewolves don't go fucking haywire. And then Lou Diamond Phillips pops up, which, by the way, love Lou Diamond Phillips. He pops up out of nowhere, and he's like, our lead scientist, Frank Grillo. And I'm like, the fuck? I was like, I mean, I'm not saying you can't be I'm not saying you can't be a hyphenate. You can't have many, many skills, but they do not paint him as like the microbiologist to start this movie. He is the most survivalist microbiologist you've ever met.
There is one dude out there who would take umbrage with this, and that is real life scientist himself, Dolph Lundgren. Now, Dolph Lundgren is no stranger to movies like this. He's done quite a few in his day. He spent much of the 90s in movies that went straight to video, straight to the bin. That dude is muscular, square-jawed, jacked up, ready for action. He's also a scientist. He's also like genius level scientist. So he's the one guy out there who goes, excuse me, I can be both things. I know, Dolph, but for the rest of us, most scientists don't look like that. Most scientists look like some amalgamation of me, you, and both of our better halves. Like, truth be told, that's usually what scientists look like. They don't tend to look like a dude who is like, you know, the top Navy SEAL trainer over at Bud's. You know what I mean? It's just like, holy shit, this dude jacked up, square jawed, and ready to rock. And he's just, you know, he's geared up, and he's putting his eye right up to the scope, the microscope, not the sniper scope.
And if I was the nitpicky kind of guy watching this movie, by the way, I'm not. I'm just throwing this out there because we are in spoilers. If I was the one really dissecting the logic in this movie, I would wonder when they create this Moonscreen stuff, There's apparently two versions of it, because there's kinds that go in your eyes, which is what actually protects Frank Grillo and the other scientists once they escape the compound. So they are protected from the moon an hour at a time when they look at the moon. But then there's a spray they put on the body that is supposed to prevent them from going and wolfing out as well. I'm like, so there's a spray and there's an eye thing and then just the eye thing. And I'm just like, and they, again, this is just, I don't answer the question, Patrick, because I don't need to know, because the logic doesn't need to make sense. But I was watching it like, in my logic brain, I was like, hold on, does that totally make, and then I was like, no, Damon, shut the fuck up. This is not the point of this movie.
Don't look for the sense. That's the wrong thing to do. What you need to look for is werewolves closing in on people. And there's basically two competing storylines, which is the one we just set up, which is like, shit went wrong at the lab, so now I have to run the gauntlet of basically the purge night with werewolves to get back to my niece. And the other one is inside the house, the niece and the sister-in-law. That, Damon, now that, to me, okay, I'm going to be real honest with you. That's the part of the movie that I have the biggest problem with, which is weird because it's the most simple part. It's not the part that requires logic. It doesn't. It's like, oh, they're trapped in this house and werewolves are closing in on them. Like, okay, I got it. For some reason, they decided that what this woman needed to do while she was in this house is run monologues. This poor woman who was like, oh, you're signing me up for an action werewolf movie. Cool. Like, I'll just get to like fire a gun at some werewolves. And they're like, no, you have like 6 pages of dialogue at a clip. Like every single time you're on screen, you're going to talk a lot to no one in particular. And then when the werewolves actually start descending on the house, you are going to waste your bullets in the stupidest way possible. In like, you're going to fire at things that aren't there. And then you are going to find a way to just have no bullets left by the time the werewolves actually break into the house. That, even for a movie where I wanted to turn the logic off, everything that went on inside that house was beyond frustrating. That was the stuff that was actually pulling me out of the movie. And this, we haven't even got, some of the categories is actually going to open us up to the weird shit that goes on in this movie. But these two storylines, the Frank Grillo microbiologist and his sister-in-law in that house, the sister-in-law in that house, that shit drove me nuts.
Yeah, the sister-in-law, so, okay, just again, this is logic. I know, I just said don't have logic, but this is like the simplest of logic, which is they build this giant compound, and at one point Frank Grillo hands her the shotgun and says, here's, make sure you know how to use it. You're not going to need it, but just in case you need it. Okay, I understand that. Now, on the very off chance she's going to need it, wouldn't you give her more than like 10 rounds of ammo? That's all she has. She literally has 10
No, that's applying
shells.
Logic. We're not applying that logic.
And then there's that one, you mentioned the monologue, the one that got me, which listen, you're right. It's unnecessary. It makes no sense. But it literally was like, I was just like, I am at peak Seagal right now. This is peak
very Seagal.
She gives like this motivational speech to herself when she's loading the shotgun. I was dying because I don't remember. I'm not going to quote it, but it's literally like, it's almost like, it felt like the cadence from Full Metal Jacket with far less, where she's like, this is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine. My rifle is my friend. Without me, I am useless. Without my rifle is useless. Oh, you know what I'm talking about? Like that.
Yes, no, that's exactly how I felt about those scenes. I was like, why is she reciting it like Vincent D'Onofrio in Full Metal Jacket? Like, and to whom? Like, who is she talking to? Like, she's just talking to nobody.
Yeah, it was full on. Like I got such like this is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine. Vibes from that scene. I was like, what is she doing right now? Like she's literally pumping herself up while loading shotgun shells. I was dying. I was like, this is peak right here. This is like the peak of this movie. I would agree that like the Frank Grillo and fellow scientists escaping the compound and then fleeing, which as you said, they never specifically tell you until way later that they're going to get to his sister-in-law and niece.
Yeah, they take a long time to explain what they're actually doing.
Yeah. And like, at one point, they actually run into like a weird, like underground dweller society, which you kind of think in that moment, I'm like, this is going to mean more, right? No, it sure doesn't.
Nope.
They run to them for 5 minutes and then get the hell out of there. But
and
like,
I want to credit too, like in that moment, this was a very 90s moment where they're basically like being like mowed down by the werewolves, and then they are saved by like a kid in some weird post-apocalyptic garb, and you're like, oh shit, okay, we're gonna learn about the mole people or whatever, the people that have been planning for this for years. Nope, you don't learn about them. They just go down that way. Like literally their job was just go underground. Like we don't. And I was like, well, they'll come back in the end. They don't. It doesn't matter. And I was like, even in those old school 90s movies, those people in the end mattered. Those people in the end like saved their ass. They were the Deus Ex Machina that came in like just at the right moment to save everything. Nope, they don't matter. They just they show them for a second and they just go, yeah, just go underground. Leave us alone. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess we're doing that.
I wonder if there's like a director's cut where there's like an extra 10 minutes of the mole people and like they explain how to beat the moon virus or whatever the hell it's called. Like, is there, and then did somebody in editing go, hold on here, are we applying logic to the moon thing? Because I don't think that's going to work here. Let's just dump the moon. Let's just dump the underground mole people like 3 minutes. Because when they meet him, there's like the leader shows up and he's like, why shouldn't we kill you? And he's like, we're just trying to find the tunnels, man. He's like, okay, I'll show you the tunnels. Scene. That's it. That's the end of them. never to appear again. But the Frank Grillo co-scientist escape through the city is pretty effective. Like, it's a pretty effective action recover, like, you know, it's a very very standard, but I mean effective action film. The scenes with the niece and the sister-in-law do kind of take you out of it because, again, this is logic applying here. The wolves are not intelligent, but they are also kind of intelligent, because the whole premise of why the wolves attack the compound is because at one point she has a neighbor who is, by the way, the least equipped neighbor for this whole supermoon incident ever. Like, she doesn't have her doors locked. Like, she's
oh my
sitting down with
God,
a bucket. She's sitting down with a bucket of popcorn, like nothing's going on around her. Okay. A wolf comes in, she runs over and she's like, help, I need help, I'm outside. And she's like, I can't let you in. And then the psycho wolf killer neighbor who gets turned into a wolf, of course, comes over and kills her, and the sister-in-law's like, no, whatever your name is, oh, I can't believe you're dead. And so then the wolf, the neighbor wolf, the one who was firing guns earlier, who has wolf killer literally on his jacket, which is, by the way, still fitted around his wolf chest.
Oh, let's get into that in a second.
but he's standing outside the compound. Now, he's not trying to get in, by the way. He's just looking. He's looking at the compound. She decides to spray him with pepper spray, which they had like these rigged things, which is so convenient that he happens to be standing right in front of the hose that she has ready with the pepper spray.
Eamon, you're getting dangerously into logic.
I know. She sprays him, and then Wolf Killer gets so pissed off that, first off, he splashes water in his face to get the pepper spray out. Wolf goes, oh, I gotta get this cleaned out. And then he calls all his wolf buddies over, and they all attack the compound simply because she sprayed him with pepper spray. That, I got that right. Like, that's the premise of why the wolves attack the compound. Not because they're trying to get to her, not because it's some animalistic instinct they know someone's in there. It's because she sprayed him, he's pissed off, so he calls all his wolf buddies, and they got to go after the compound. I got that right.
Yeah, and I was really trying to wrap my head around like the why of it all, and I was like, I don't see how this is working. I go, Damon will figure it out. Damon always knows. Like, Damon always picks up on the things I'm missing. Not with this movie. This stuff is missing. This movie's missing a lot of that stuff. Like you say, director's cut. I'm willing to bet the director's cut's 4 hours long. I'm willing to bet there's so much information in the director's cut, and whoever saw this was like, no, cut this all the way down to just the nitty and the gritty, please, nothing else. Because a lot of that stuff is, you're just like, why? Like, why is this even happening? A lot of stuff in there, you're just like, I don't understand why it's happening. I don't get it. I don't get what's going on.
Yeah, it's bizarre. So the two storylines, while they do run like parallel to each other, the one is definitely better than the other. The one with Frank Grillo and the co-scientist definitely is stronger, because the one with the sister-in-law and the niece, which, again, credit. By the way, I do want to give credit where credit's due with the screenwriting here. So the scientist that escapes with Frank Grillo, her husband was one of the wolves who basically indoctrinated himself and volunteered as one of the people to get tested that night by the new substance they're trying to cure this lichen virus or whatever the fuck you want to call it. So you got the married scientist roaming around with super muscular, testosterone filled, like you look at him and your dick gets hard, Frank Grillo. And then you got the sister-in-law a year after his brother died. She's pissed at the brother. She's like, "Why did you leave us?" She's cursing him.
More monologues.
More monologues by herself to no one. And the niece, who is like, "Uncle Wesley," but like really, she's like, "Dad."
Yeah.
Credit to the screenwriter. I will give the credit to really to the screenwriters right here. At no point does Frank Grillo bone the other scientist or bone the sister-in-law.
That's right.
There's no cross-boning in this movie, which I fully expected. I fully expected at some point that like he's going to have an affair with the sister-in-law or he's going to bone the scientist lady. Neither happened. I was like, you know what? That's what I saw coming. It didn't actually happen. So kudos. You didn't give me what I thought you were going to give me.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was just like posting about it with somebody else on like, whatever. I don't know what, Twitter or Threads or Blue Sky, a loose count these days. But someone was talking about like not every movie needs love interests. This is one of those movies that does not need a love interest, and they didn't bog this movie down with it. They didn't bother to.
But tell me you didn't think it was coming though. Like it felt.
I thought for
like
sure there was definitely a point near the end where I was like, "Is he going to kiss his sister-in-law?" Like it seemed like it was happening, but they didn't do it. They didn't. You're right. Credit to the screenwriter and if they did shoot it, they were like, "Let's take it out," because it is weird. At the end of the day, it's like that was your brother's wife, dude. It's kind of weird. Like, let's not open this can of worms tonight. Tonight we're busy. The werewolves tonight. Screwing later. Werewolves tonight. So yeah, I think I do like that they didn't go with that. Not every movie needs love interest. I fully believe that. This movie was about survival. It really was. I mean, there's the thinnest of themes in this movie is survive the night, and they do that. They actually achieve that particular theme.
Can we real quick, last thing before we get to sport, till we get to categories, can we talk about the ending? Because the ending of this movie is basically Frank Grillo, Wesley finally gets back to the compound. At that point, the werewolves have broken into the compound and they've gone fully after his sister-in-law and his niece, and they're in a full-on fight for survival. He gets in there and he realizes there's only one way I can stop Wolf Killer, whatever the fuck his name was. I've got to transform into a wolf. I've got to go after him. I got to go full 30 days a night. Credit to them for ripping off a really cool movie. Yep. Originally a comic book. Same thing happened in the comic book. And he's like, I got to do it. The only way I could stop Wolf Killer is to transform into a wolf myself. So he looks up into the moonlight. His moon spray has worn off, and he transforms into a werewolf. Now, once again, this is where logic kind of butts heads with what actually happens in this film, because they never totally tell you, do the wolves still know who they are? Because if a billion people died, then that means everyone that turned into a werewolf just knowingly slaughtered their friends and neighbors. But if they just turn into animals and it's just instinct, then you kind of understand it better. But that logic, again, gets kind of tossed out the window because you never fully understand, do the wolves know who they are? Because all the wolves in this movie are kind of acting together until Frank Grillo turns into a werewolf and he gets into a full-on werewolf fight with Wolf Killer, with whatever the guy's name is. So he's protecting his niece and his sister-in-law. Again, toss logic out the window. I'm just saying it's the one time in this movie where the wolves stop working together and they fight. It's Frank Grillo's transformation, and it's very 30 Days a Night where he has just enough humanity left in him to know he has to fuck with the Wolf Killer to save his family.
This is the exact kind of logic you sign up for when you sign up for a movie like this. When you sign up for like, the third sequel to whatever Double Impact or some shit. Like this is what you're signing up for. Like you want this to happen. And I called it about 5 to 10 minutes into the movie. I go, Frank Grillo's going to turn into a werewolf at the end and fight werewolves. Like there's no way that's not happening. And there's something to be said about like, hey, like I'm watching Fast and the Furious. Are there going to be cars? If there was no cars, you'd be like, kind of, what the fuck? This was one of those situations where I was like, Frank Grillo at some point will be a Frank Grillo werewolf, and they deliver on that. The problem is you just see it coming from a billion miles away. Like it's a very easy tell in this movie, but they deliver on it. If you're looking for werewolf on werewolf fighting, they finally give it to you in the end.
And to their credit, when he gets done killing the werewolf guy, he does start to like go after his family because they're just there. But then miraculously, it's right at the end of the night where the sunlight comes out and everyone transforms back into their human selves. And so Frank Grillo turns back into shirtless Frank Grillo, by the way, which, okay, here's where
now you're playing logic again.
I know,
David.
but here's where like continuity. I'm not even saying logic, just continuity comes into play. When you wolf out, these things become these like giant, like 8-foot tall, hulking creatures. Okay, first off, wolf killers. Bulletproof vest still perfectly fits on his chest, even though he's exploded into being like this 8-foot, massive 80-inch chest beast, but somehow the wolf killer thing still fits because you got to be able to identify him as the neighbor. And then when Frank Grillo explodes into werewolf Frank Grillo, he shrinks back down again. He's wolfing out. He's shirtless. There's abs on top of abs. Jealousy for every man watching this movie right now that Frank Grillo looks as good as he does. And then you just happen to notice, oh, he's wearing a full pair of jeans. Not ripped jeans. He didn't hulk out. He's just wearing jeans. And that's literally how the movie ends. And I was like, didn't he just hulk out into nude werewolf and now he's back in full jeans? Like
he put the jeans back on. That's what happened. Like some producer was over there going that no one cares. No one cares. And the next scene he's got to have jeans because if we have him naked, then I got to cut 2 different versions of it, and we can't sell it to USA up all night and all that stuff. There's logic in there.
Of all the logic that I said don't pay attention to and made no sense, that's probably the one that bugged me the most because I'm like, he was just hulked out like 10 seconds ago and now he's just shrunk right down. He's wearing perfectly fitting jeans again. I'm just saying, like, at least give me the ripped jeans. Give me that much.
They wouldn't have done that in the 90s. In the 90s, they would have gone nude. I'm sorry. You're right. The 90s were the horniest of all the action thriller decades. They would have 100% been nude in the end.
Yeah. You would have gotten the real Grillo, is all I'm saying.
The full Grillo, yeah.
You would have gotten Frank and his Grillos.
You would have gotten Grillos for Frank hanging down there.
Yeah, you would have got Frank and his beans. That's all I'm saying. Patrick, let's get into categories for this wonderful, wonderful movie called Werewolves. Let's kick things off with MVP, the most valuable player, as we say, the Ken Foray Banana Hammock MVP award, named after great character actor Ken Foray from the movie From Beyond, when he, almost nude, jumps down a flight of stairs and into a basement, killing a creature wearing nothing more than a thong bikini. If that's not an MVP performance, I don't know what is. So when it comes to werewolves, Patrick, who gets your MVP?
I'm going to give the MVP to some serious horror stalwarts, and that is Gillis and Woodruff, who created the werewolf costumes or the creature design werewolves for this movie. If those names, Woodward and Gillis, sound familiar, it's because they have had their hand in pretty much every Alien movie since Aliens. And the Predator movies, and just about every single thing else. The Smile Monster. These are the old school pros. These guys basically have one of the coolest dream jobs in all of Hollywood. They make monsters for people. And when Steven C. Miller said, I need werewolves for my movie, can we get Woodward and Gillis? And they said, yeah, actually we can get them. That's a coup for your movie. That's a win for your movie. That's like saying, I need blood, guts, and gore. Can I get Tom Savini? And he says yes. You know what I mean? Like you're just stoked because you're not with just any old creature builder. You're with the creature builders, the premier creature builders, and they built these big bad werewolves. And as you mentioned, Damon, these werewolves get to keep clothes on sometimes. I called it clothing optional. Sometimes they grow into an 8-foot werewolf and they have a flak jacket on. Sometimes they grow into a giant werewolf and they're completely naked. The logic doesn't matter. The fact is the werewolves are humongous. They're bloodthirsty. They got huge, gnarly mouths dripping with slime. If you're looking for big, bad, long-muzzled werewolves, and I know some of you werewolf fanatics out there know what I'm talking about. There's short-muzzled werewolves and there's long-muzzled werewolves. These are the long-muzzled kind. Woodward and Gillis delivered it.
It's kind of like, and also what I appreciate about their version of the werewolves is it's almost like Gremlins 2, where when you watch Gremlins 2, like they have all the different gremlins. Like there's the dumb gremlin, there's the spike, the spike gremlin. Like you got to be able to tell them different because gremlins all look the same. But if you don't, you got to have some wearing leather jackets. You got to tell them different. They do that with these werewolves. Like there's a punk rock werewolf. There's the Frank Grillo werewolf wearing pants. You got the flak jacket werewolf. Like there's a lot of different werewolves. So you can actually differentiate from one werewolf to the next because they are still actually able to wear their human clothing in some fucked up, who the fuck knows how this work ways. So yes, I give them credit. And you have to imagine a big part of the budget went to those guys saying, design the creatures for this movie, and credit to them. Also, they are practical effects guys. And you know me, Patrick. I'm a practical effects lover. They create practical effects monsters. Kudos. I agree. For me, listen, when I talk about this being the quintessential dumb action horror film, and again, when I say dumb, that is a compliment. This movie, if you're not going to have Werewolves starring Jason Statham, you need Werewolves starring Frank Grillo. Now, do I still think it's kind of weird that he was not the leader of like the soldiers and he was a microbiologist? Yes, it's kind of an odd choice. But he is a badass. He has that line which you see in the trailer where he's firing the minigun and he says, "Hey, bite me," and he fires off all the rounds. So many cheesy one-liners, all the muscles, all the abs, perfectly toned skin. He is full Frank Grillo in this movie. And again, if you're in this kind of a movie, you need Vin Diesel, you need Jason Statham, you need, back in the day, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal, and in this case, you need Frank Grillo. You could not put Jason Bateman in that role and you get the same movie. I like Jason Bateman. Jason Bateman's an incredible actor. Jason Bateman cannot do what Frank Grillo did in this movie. So Frank Grillo made this movie. He gets my MVP.
Yeah, Frank's a real tough guy. Like he just is. He's just one of those guys. I don't know how old he is, but I'm guessing he's probably around 50 to 55 to 58. I'm guessing he's somewhere in there. Dude's jacked and ripped and shredded, and he's cool as ice on screen. That's what I like about Frank Grillo. It's like, I don't care how dumb the movie is. The dude looks cool. And I don't care if he's
you want to feel bad about yourself? He's 59.
And see, I was going to guess he was 60, but I didn't want to insult them. I didn't want to insult the man. You know what I mean? But I was like, I bet he's about 60. He's about 60. He's shredded. He's jacked. And he plays a microbiologist in this movie. And then when he picks up a gun, you believe it. That's what you need for this movie. That's exactly what you need for this movie. And Frank Grillo delivers that.
In a contest between guys who are around 60 making you feel bad about the way you look in your 40s, it's between Frank Grillo and Brad Pitt. They're just continuously making you feel like a total piece of shit because at 60 they look like they do, and at 30, 40 you don't look anything like them. So
but they couldn't be nicer guys.
Oh, yeah. No, I've never met Brad Pitt, so I have no idea, but I do know Frank Grillo, and he's like the nicest guy in the world, genuinely like a sweetheart, but a total fucking badass. Patrick, let's go on to best gore, because this is a horror movie, and there is some wolf kills in this movie. So what was your best gore in Werewolves?
I'll be honest, Damon, this movie's kind of surprisingly light on gore, and I have a theory for that, and that's coming up in a couple of categories why maybe this was maybe a little lighter on gore than it should have been. But my favorite gore I decided this time around was the wolf head rip, which I believe is in the final battle, if I'm not mistaken. Frank Grillo werewolf takes on fucking wolf killer wolf, and decides to rip his head right off of his body. It's just a cool way to kill. It's just a cool way to kill a creature like that, and to see the decapitated wolf head. I mean, that's the kind of shit I live for, right? You know what I mean? That's exactly what I'm up for in a werewolf movie.
100%. Yeah, it's a cool kill, and he twists his head off. I mean, that's a cool kill, no matter how you cut it. So yeah, I agree. That's a cool one. Mine, I think it's the other one in the movie as far as gore goes, and this was like the moment where I was like, okay, now we're in a really proper horror film, because there were some cool like swipes and some blood and things, but there's a scene where Frank Grillo and the other scientists are trying to escape, and they kind of get caught into like a weird like circle of werewolves, and this militant group are firing down on them with guns. They got the minigun tied to the back of a pickup truck, and they are like firing at the werewolves. And again, do we find out who these militant people are? Do we find out their purpose? No, we don't need to know all that. Much like the underground dwellers, they're just there. And at one point, when the werewolves finally do get the better of the militants, because they're going to get the better of the militants, at one point one of the werewolves literally just rips the face off of one of the militants, and his entire face just comes off, and he's screaming, just blood and guts everywhere. And I was like, that's pretty fucking awesome when you rip someone's face off with your werewolf claw.
Yeah, that was another really good one there too. There was also another one, I guess, like an honorable mention would be the girl next, the worst prepared person for the entire thing, who was just sitting eating popcorn with all the lights on and the music blaring. She gets like her chest or rib cage like ripped out, and they cut to that. That was also a pretty good one too.
Yeah, that was a good one too. Like I said, it wasn't super gory, but there were a couple moments in there. Patrick, let's move next to Best Werewolf. As we said, you can differentiate these. These are gremlins. You can differentiate these werewolves. So did you have a favorite werewolf in Werewolves?
Yes, late in the game, I was like, man, when are we going to get like a fucking metal werewolf? We got one. We got a punk werewolf, I guess is what you would call him. He had a leather vest on with like stud spikes on it and a mohawk, and he had a fucking nose ring in. And my wife turns to me and goes, did the nose ring also grow with him? Because it's like humongous. I go, yeah, the nose ring grew too.
I mean, why does it need to make sense, Patrick? What are we watching here?
Yeah, the point is you get a werewolf with a nose ring. Doesn't anyone want that? Everybody wants that.
And that also speaks to my favorite werewolf, just because logically it made the least sense of any werewolf in this movie, beyond, Frank Grillo shrinking back down and wearing pants. Was Wolf Killer, the neighbor, because not only does the flak jacket still fit him throughout the entire movie, because it says Wolf Killer, so you got to have him wearing that the entire time. But at one point, when you meet this lunatic, he's going, hoorah, hoorah, and he paints his face with it's not camouflage, it's like white and red marks, so he's not trying to hide from anybody, but it's like very distinctive, like paint across his face. When he turns into the werewolf has the white and red streaks painted across its, against its nose and its hair. And so, yeah, I was like, you know what, like, credit to sticking with a plan here. You wanted to make Wolf Killer look cool, so you had to give him the face paint and the flak jacket. It still fits on the werewolf. Why the fuck not?
Why the fuck not? And it's an easy identifier, so you know who. And let's be honest, that they did that in Alien Romulus too. They made one of the aliens defined, so you knew which one it was throughout the whole movie. They're applying the same logic here. If you can imagine, it's an even bigger stretch than a movie like Alien Romulus, logically, but it's all for fun and games, so why not?
Yeah. I mean, if all these things are getting big, at some point, like, couldn't they apply the Monster Squad logic? Like, couldn't you kick one of these things in the nuts? Like, if you're
you definitely can.
Bigger, like, couldn't you just kick him in the nards? Like, couldn't you kick one of these things in the nards?
I swear I saw wolf balls at one point. I could be wrong, but I swear I saw some fucking meat swanging. I'm pretty sure I did.
But they had to put Frank Grillo in pants, so just like
Frank Grillo had to wear pants. You're really going to embarrass people if you get him pantsless, because he's swinging.
Yeah, he's gonna embarrass the wolves. That's what's gonna. That's why they did.
Yeah,
They're like, he's
why.
gonna embarrass the wolves. Like the 8-foot wolves can't stand up to Frank Grillo. So we gotta.
You
We
know
gotta
he's
put some,
swinging a bat, bro.
yeah,
You know he can't.
we got to put some fucking pants on Grillo. His Frankenbeans are just swinging, so we can't intimidate the werewolves. Patrick, next category, best stunt. This is a full blown action film with horror kind of stuck in there. The horror is coming from werewolves, which is what makes it horror, but it's an action film. This is a full blown action film. So, what was your favorite stunt in Werewolves?
I put this category in because indeed it's an action film. There's plenty of stunts. But I also realized the reason why there's probably not a lot of gore in this movie and not a ton of on screen kills is they spent a lot of money on some of these stunts. And I go, maybe we didn't need the stunt so much as we needed the werewolf gore and the werewolf kills and all that stuff. But I digress. My favorite stunt was, and this looked and seemed very expensive, is at one point Wesley and his cohort are trying to escape in a car and they're not paying attention. They're being attacked by shit and they full blown crash into a bus and they explode, but they're fine. Again, don't apply logic to it, but they full blown crash into a bus and like they show it. It's like a top down shot where the bus is going across the frame and they slam into it and like basically like puncture a hole all the way through the bus. And you're just like, holy fucking shit, that was a big move.
Yeah, that was early on too. Like that's like within the first like half hour they crash in that bus. And they actually have to crawl out of the truck through the bus, by the way, to get out and escape because it's getting ready to blow up. So yes, they do a very elaborate crash and burn sequence right there. And to that point, my favorite stunt in the movie, and I guess it's kind of a stunt, just really more of an action set piece, is when both the militant guy and Frank Grillo are using the minigun tied to the back of the pickup, and they are just blowing shit up with this gun. Like it is full on. Like, again, Predator had the minigun when they mow down the jungle. In this setting, they're mowing down a city. But man, did they put a lot of the budget into blowing shit up with that minigun. And again, credit to them because miniguns are pretty fucking awesome, not gonna lie. But they are just like blowing shit up. Like they're just everything, cars, wolves, glass, like the fucking storefronts, everything's just getting mowed down by this minigun. And it's awesome.
That felt like a big nod to Predator. I mean, there's no way every guy on set hadn't watched Predator before. There's no fucking way.
Yeah, and also speaking of, we didn't do best line because we tend to save that for movies that have been out so we can cut the dialogue. But early on in the movie, at the facility, at the scientific facility where they're trying to prevent this from happening, and then all hell breaks loose and the wolves actually turn and start killing people. At one point, one of the soldiers or one of the people trying to stop the wolves is firing his gun, and he goes, "Die, you wolf bastard!" And I was like, "This is awesome! Like, this is just the greatest dialogue ever." "Die, you wolf bastard!" I was like, I want that on a t-shirt. Patrick, would you like to explain our next category, breaking the myth?
Well, Damon, you and I are true werewolf fanatics, and with werewolf lore comes some sets of rules. Well, Werewolves, the movie, despite its title, says fuck the rules. The rules don't fucking matter. And so I just wanted to list off some stuff, and feel free to chime in here, Damon. I'll fire off the first one. If you want to talk about another one, go ahead. If not, I'll keep going. But basically, there were a lot of werewolf myths that just sort of, they were like, fuck it, we won't worry about that in this movie, despite the fact that indeed a full moon will turn you into a wolf, which is the number one myth. You'd think that some of the other myths would apply, and they just said, nah, fuck all that, because that requires logic, and we're not doing that in Werewolves. One of the big ones was, and the only reason I pointed this out is they actually made a point to show it. These werewolves can't smell for shit. Like, Wesley's like hiding under a car. They do this scene where the muzzle of a werewolf like descends and is sniffing around and then decides to leave. They don't do anything clever like douse him in gasoline so they can't pick up on it. They don't do any of that. He's just sitting there panting and sweating and being extra smelly because maybe there's a little bit of piss and shit in his drawers because he's like being chased by giant werewolves. These werewolves can't smell him. And I go, they are giant canines, And canines have an incredible sense of smell that actually sees more of the world than our eyes can see. Like there is so much more to the olfactory sensors of a werewolf, and they made it a point to show that their olfactory sensors fucking suck.
Well, and that also speaks to like the entire like how both intelligent and like the strength of these werewolves, because at some points they seem like they're chucking people across the room pretty powerfully, but then other times they don't seem like they're that strong. And then very much like I was talking about with the logic, and I'm not saying the logic of the movie, by the way, I'm not going back to what I said, I'm saying like they turn into like these animalistic killing machines, but then they kind of team up and they're going after specific people. And very much like when Frank Grillo turns into the wolf, he just attacks another wolf. Like, yeah, we're just going to have these fucking things do whatever. So like, because the one that absolutely cracked me up is when Wolf Killer gets sprayed with the pepper spray and he's literally in the back in the bird bath splashing water on his face. And I'm like, would that happen? Would he just stick his face in the water? Like, why is he literally he's literally washing his face off.
Yeah, it was strange. I mean, I guess his muzzle would get in the way. There's the logic of that one. But you mentioned the super strength. This really got me because, you know, werewolves, we've all accepted werewolves have super strength. And then even healing factor, which that doesn't seem to apply at all. They say no healing factor in this movie. But the strength thing got me because they show super strength. And then they're getting chased in that mall, and the werewolves are stopped by like those standards, like little like
gates,
like
the gates.
Yeah, those little gates that just protect a storefront. It's like, I'm sorry, like you're telling me like a pack of 6 gigantic werewolves that can pick up a 200-pound man and throw him 20 yards can't just tear away a simple wire gate? Like they're completely stuck by that. They were stuck by like boards in the house. You know, the sister-in-law stuck in that house, and it's like, oh, I can't get around these boards. It's like, either show the strength and apply it, or don't show the strength, and then I don't have to worry about it. But for the strength and the smell, they made points to emphasize it and then show that it wouldn't apply in other places. And I was like, that's a bit screwy. And I want to mention one more because I got my TikTok live going here right now, and my buddy Real Dumb was in there. And check out Real Dumb if you REEL Dumb on TikTok, if you're on TikTok. And he brought something up while he's listening to this. He goes, wait a minute. What if that ring in the nose of the punk werewolf is silver? Wouldn't that fucking kill a werewolf because they get killed by silver? That's a great point. Why would they have silver on, like, at all? You know, silver should be a problem. But again, the movie Werewolves, logic does not apply.
So that was my last thing I want to talk about, which is how the fuck do you kill these things? Because
firearms, I guess.
The silver bullet thing they don't even mention that. Like, that's not even an afterthought. And if there's one, like, generalized element of almost every werewolf movie, story, history, whatever, you know, mythology, it's that silver bullets or silver objects kill them. Okay, throw that out the window. But then even gunfire doesn't seem to stop them, because when those militants are mowing down the werewolves, and even in the lab, there are soldiers full on blasting these things with bullets, and they just keep coming. So are they just, like, literally is the only way to kill them is what Grillo Wolf does, which is rip its head off? Is that it? Because they really never really tell you how to kill these things. Because when that militant group is just mowing these things down with machine guns, they just keep coming. Like, they don't get affected by the gunfire. And I'm just like, so are they unkillable? Are they invincible? Like, how do you actually kill the werewolves? Because clearly you can't. Because these things just keep coming throughout the entire movie. Like, when they're fired, there's one part where a guy's literally just unloading a handgun into this thing's chest, and it just keeps coming like, fuck you. But okay, so would silver bullets work? Because they never even mention that. That's not even an afterthought in this movie. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, they never give you a way to actually kill a werewolf. And if they tell you it's gunfire, that ain't it. Because they mow these fucking things down with all kinds of gunfire, and they keep coming.
Yeah, I still, after watching the entire movie, don't know how you kill one of them. And I don't know that ripping that one's head off actually killed it. Like, it's just the end of the movie. It doesn't mean he's dead at all.
I mean, you could see a headless wolf killer still running around the next supermoon. Who knows?
You could.
Speaking of which, when I say the next supermoon, our next category is remake, sequel, or leave it alone. And this is pretty self-explanatory, Patrick. This is where we take whatever movie we're reviewing and we say, should they remake it, should they sequelize it, or should they just leave it alone? So when it comes to this cinematic masterpiece that is Werewolves, do you remake it, do you sequelize it, or do you leave it alone?
I remake it. And I tell you what I do. I remake it with a big ass budget. Like, I don't know the exact budget on this. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. I don't have a budget for this movie, but I can tell you right now it wasn't enough for what they wanted to do, which was create a big ass werewolf action movie. They didn't have the money to do it. They had the money to do what they did, and what they did is still impressive. It's fucking hard as shit to make a movie, and they made this one. So kudos to them, hats off to them, because they said, we're going to make a werewolf action movie, and they made one. But what they want to make a much bigger one. They want to make one with real big explosions, real big stunts, like a lot more blood, guts, and gore, all that good stuff. They're looking for that stuff. And you could tell they just had to pick and choose. They had to go, okay, we'll just have to make this more of a chase sequence than an actual attack sequence because we can't really afford to do the attack parts. Give them the money to do the full fucking money. To see all the crazy shit that you want to see, because the ideas on the page were much, much bigger and they had to shrink them down. That's just the reality of it. It's the big budget. But do I want to see a werewolf action movie that is absolutely no holds barred? Not the movie, but the concept? Absolutely.
So I'm going to take one step further, and I'm not even going to say prequel or sequel. I'm going to fucking say franchise. Because here's the thing. As I said, this movie feels very, action-oriented franchise. Because originally, the original title of this movie was Year 2. And that was the premise of this being the second year since the supermoon made everyone into werewolves. Now, that would have confused people without the trailer to know what this movie's about, just to call it Year 2. So I understood why they called it Werewolves. But if they're going to make a sequel, you could call it Werewolves Year 3, or you could make a prequel and call it Werewolves Year 1, or Werewolves Prime, or whatever the fuck. And there is so much potential of just, this is, like, I understand people are going to get mad that I make this comparison, but I think it's a fair comparison. There are like 19 Jurassic Park movies at this point. There's Jurassic Park, there's Jurassic Park 2, 3, now there's Jurassic World, and now they're making another Jurassic. And really all it comes down to is humans fucking around with dinosaurs. That's really what it boils down to. Now, I'm not saying the first one isn't a brilliant piece of filmmaking, Steven Spielberg. It was. I remember seeing that as a kid. It was great. But ultimately, that's what every Jurassic Park movie is about. It's humans fucking around with dinosaurs they probably shouldn't be fucking around with. And there have been some really bad Jurassic Park movies. All you got to do is keep making, just like The Purge. They made Purge, the Chapter 1, The Purge Anarchy, The Purge whatever the fuck. Werewolf Prime is the first year. Werewolf Year 3 is next year. Werewolf Year 4, whatever. Werewolf 2029. Werewolf X, where they go to space. Whatever the fuck. You can go all over the place with this franchise. So if this one makes money, get ready for more fucking werewolves, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, you might need to go see this a few times in the theater to make sure that they can make that franchise of werewolf movies, because let's get crazier.
Yeah, let's just go. Let's go, baby. Patrick, next category. Can we survive this horror film? Now, I'm going to go first here. Based on logic, which we've thrown out the window here, you and I would consider ourselves werewolf experts, right? Like, we know werewolves. We love werewolves. That all goes out the fucking window here, okay? And also, to their credit, microbiologists are also incredible survivalists. So I'm assuming, me having watched a lot of these movies, I would be able to build a pretty kick-ass compound, even though I probably have no real idea how to do it. So I think I would survive to that point, where I could build a pretty kick-ass compound. But really, just to me, the secret to surviving these films really comes down to what the underground dweller people stay out of the moonlight and go underground where the wolves aren't going to be at. So I think I could survive this movie just based upon the fact that really they're telling you just duck your head, don't get in the moonlight, or turn into a fucking werewolf and kill people. One of the two, but you got a shot to make it out of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm gonna apply the logic of the movie, which is, I guess if I can turn to a werewolf, I can decide to attack other werewolves. So I can go, and for all I know, I don't really know how to be killed. So I can just go out and have a fucking purge night with other werewolves. But I guess I can just use my logical brain to keep only attacking werewolves and not attack humans. But let's play the other scenario here because I did actually have the conversation with my wife while we were watching this, and I was like, would we have a fucking shot? Like considering where we live and all this, like the whole scenario, like I got a lot of glass near the back of the house that would need to be boarded up. I got loud kids. I don't know that we would make it through, Damon. I think the Guerra family gets wiped off the map night one. I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm just playing by the rules of this movie. I think I'd be a great survivalist because I've seen a couple movies, and I actually am closer to the scientist than I am the soldier. But Frank Grillo's got both skills. Why can't I have both skills, Patrick?
You can have it all, Damon. You can have anything you want. Werewolves shows that sky's the limit.
Can I throw out one more plot point that I forgot to bring up earlier that I just wanted to mention?
Sure.
So during the big fight scene with the militants, Frank Grillo is getting in a truck and the other scientist is getting in a truck, and a wolf grabs her and lifts her in the air. And it's like a really dramatic moment because she's like the other character that's mattered this entire time. Was I wrong in thinking that like they were going to like have her pop back up, or she was going to turn up dead, or like she was going to survive somehow? She just disappears, and that's the end of her. Like, we don't see her die. We don't know if she survives. They just lift her in the air, and she's just fucking gone. Like, we have to imagine she's dead, but she was like the fourth most important character in this entire movie. You had Frank Grillo, you had the sister-in-law, you had the niece, and you had this scientist. The scientist gets lifted in the air by a wolf, and then she's just fucking gone. They never mention her again.
The logic of this movie is that sometimes people don't fucking matter to the story at all. And at the end of the day, that other scientist didn't matter.
Yeah, was I wrong though when she disappeared? Like, were you thinking like, oh, she's gonna pop back up, or maybe their head's gonna fall on the fucking on the windshield, like a dramatic death, something? She's gone.
Damon, you said the wrong words. I did not think in that moment. I was not
That's
thinking
true.
that deep into the movie. There was no more thinking going on. So no, I wasn't thinking
Yeah, that's
that
true.
she could
That's
come
true.
back.
What was I thinking by even thinking that?
Yeah, what were you doing applying thought to this?
Yeah. Yeah. So Werewolves, Patrick, it is in theaters now. You can go check it out. And also, one of the like by the way, we were planning on reviewing this regardless. We just happened to end up getting reached out to by the studio and getting a screener. So again,
they're like,
appreciate the
thanks a
screener.
fucking lot.
But I said it earlier, and I'm saying now, like, we're kind of having a jokey good time, but I would have to say, like, if we did a regular podcast with just regular movies and we just watched, like, the Fast and the Furious series, I enjoy those movies, and I'd be making the same jokes and having the same fun right now with those movies as I am this, because, again, I don't need them to be more than what they are, and that's what I will say about Werewolves. I don't need it to be more than what it is, a dumb, fun action film. Good enough for me. Like, I still had fun.
I think a lot of people are going to like this movie. I think a lot of, like, based on what I now know about the horror community and what they lift up and what they like, I think a lot of people in the horror community are going to be like, I loved this movie. And for the reasons we've been talking about all night, if you can turn your brain off and just sit down with this thing, you're going to have some fun. But don't try to apply logic. Don't think. And at the end of the day, werewolves will satiate you. It will give you werewolves. It will give you guns. It will even give you shirtless Frank Grillo. It literally gives you everything you ever asked for.
And I know this is going to probably piss off a portion of our horror living audience, but there are definitely a lot of people in the horror community that love the Terrifier films. But there are a group of people who really don't like them because they think all Terrifier is just gore and more extreme gore. Like, let's see how far we could push the envelope for gore. And it just does not work for some people. And by the way, that's okay. I wouldn't call the Terrifier series the thinking man's horror film. It is not, an A24 horror film. But I love the Terrifier series. And I think that's, again, kind of the same thing here. Like, I don't need Werewolves to be a thinking man's movie. It is just a fun, as you said, go to the movies, high-five your friends, have a couple of drinks, and enjoy it for what it is. Just throw logic out the window and enjoy. And if you're into that sort of thing, at the end of the movie, you're going to get a shirtless Frank Grillo wearing pants. What more do you need?
Most people's fantasy right there.
To that point, Patrick, our last category is always, is it scary? I think we've kind of answered this one already, but it is a horror film, by the way. It is. It's werewolves, and there are some pretty gnarly kills here and there. So it is a horror film. But I don't really think they set this up to necessarily be scary. I mean, there's a couple of jumpy moments here and there when a wolf attacks, you don't see it coming. But this is really just a fun action movie. Like I said, just like, do you know, is Dom Toretto going to survive when he jumps the car off the cliff? Yeah, he's Dom Toretto. He's Vin Diesel. Of course he's going to survive that. But in the moment, for a brief second, you might be like, oh shit, Dom Toretto's going to die. That's kind of what this movie is.
Yeah, man. Just go with it. Just fucking go with it.
Yeah, like, he's gonna make it across the railroad track. You know he is. Like, he's fucking Vin Diesel. He's not dying in this movie. You know,
spoiler alert, Frank Grillo doesn't die in this movie, and you never thought he was in the first place.
Yeah, let him cook. Let him cook. He turns into a fucking werewolf and kills another werewolf, and again, credit to the filmmakers, doesn't end up banging anybody. So, you know.
Maybe that's part 2. Let's save the banging for part 2.
Yeah, Frank Grillo is going to have a harem in the second one. Watch. That is our review for this week, Patrick. Of course, we always want to say thank you. As I said, Werewolves is going to be in theaters. If you're listening to this literally on the day it releases, it comes out tonight and on Friday. So watch it, check it out. Let us know your thoughts. Did you enjoy this dumb, fun action film? Because, again, we're having fun with it and we're kind of joking about it. But ultimately, I'm not lying when I said it was what I wanted it, what I needed it to be. It delivered. Maybe that's going to piss off some people. Maybe it's not going to work for some other people. But again, if you like Under Siege, you like Double Impact, you like American Ninja, you're probably going to have something to say enjoyable about this film. As always, I want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes in the show. Make sure you check us out on all of your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and, of course, over on our YouTube channel. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead. You'll find us on all those platforms. And if you have a YouTube, or if you just have a channel, or not a channel, if you have a subscription, you have an account, just subscribe to us. Even if you don't ever watch us on video, it helps us so much with the algorithm, search results, things like that. And you can also always check us out over on our website, rewindofTheLivingDead.com. We have all the episodes over there, video and audio versions. Questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, hit us up anytime on email. It's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rotlivingdead@gmail.com. And you can also find us on our own personal social media channels. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
And as always, want to say a big thank you to everyone that tunes into the show. We'll be back next week with another edition of Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you then with pants on.
Oh.